I never imagined my quiet little farm would turn into the center of a chaotic drama. But that's exactly what happened, and it all started on a Friday morning that I'll never forget. It was early, just after sunrise, and I was busy taking care of my chickens. The air smelled fresh, mixed with the earthy scent of hay and soil. Everything felt peaceful until I heard a loud rumbling noise coming from the driveway. At first, I thought it might be one of my neighbors stopping by to borrow tools, or maybe someone lost looking for directions. But when I walked over to see who it was, I couldn't believe my eyes. A massive yellow semi-truck was barreling down my dirt path like it owned the place. The driver stepped out, and let me tell you, this wasn't your typical trucker. She wore oversized sunglasses, had perfectly styled hair, and carried herself like she was starring in a TV commercial. "Excuse me," she said, her voice dripping with confidence. "I need to park this truck here temporarily while I handle some business." I blinked, trying to process what was happening. No," I replied, crossing my arms. "This is private property. You can't just pull up and leave your rig wherever you want." She tilted her head, giving me a look that said I'd insulted her intelligence. "Oh, don't worry about it," she said dismissively. "It's only temporary. Besides, isn't this part of Willow Creek Estates?" "Nope," I answered firmly. "You're on my land. And unless you're planning to buy eggs or hay, you need to leave." Her lips tightened into what I now realize is her signature scowl. Without another word, she climbed back into the truck, parked it right in front of my barn, and marched off toward the main road as if nothing unusual had happened. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe she'd come back soon and move the truck. But hours passed, and the semi-truck stayed put. It blocked half my driveway, making it hard for me to get around. My patience started wearing thin, but I figured I'd wait and see what happened next. Little did I know, this stranger wasn't just any random person. By noon, I discovered her name, Karen, and learned she was a key figure in the nearby Willow Creek Homeowners Association, HOA. Somehow, she convinced herself that my farm fell under their rules, even though I'd never signed up for anything like that. When I confronted her later that day, she acted like I was breaking some kind of law by not letting her park there. "This is unacceptable," she announced dramatically, snapping pictures of the truck with her phone. "Your property violates multiple clauses in the HOA handbook." "Lady," I said, struggling to stay calm, "I'm not part of your HOA. This is a working farm. We don't have handbooks or committees or whatever you're talking about." Her face turned red, and she glared at me. "That doesn't matter. This area falls within our community boundaries, which means you're subject to our rules. Move this eyesore immediately, or I'll take action." Take action. Against my farm. I knew then that things were about to get interesting. After Karen stomped off, muttering threats under her breath, I stood there shaking my head. What had just happened? How could someone waltz onto my property, park a massive truck without permission, and then act like I was the one causing problems? It didn't make sense. But one thing was clear. This wasn't going to end well if I didn't take control of the situation. The semi-truck sat there like an ugly yellow eyesore, blocking half my driveway and ruining the peaceful vibe of the farm. Chickens pecked around its tires, seemingly as confused as I was about why it was even here. Every time I looked at it, my blood pressure ticked up a notch. This wasn't just an inconvenience. It felt like an invasion. My farm has been in my family for generations, and no stranger, not even someone with an inflated sense of authority, was going to treat it like their personal parking lot. That's when I decided to call Joe, my buddy who runs the local towing company. Joe's a good guy, always ready to help out when someone needs a hand or a tow truck. When I explained the situation, he laughed so hard I thought he might drop the phone. "You're telling me some HOA queen parked her rig on your land and thinks she rules the place?" he said between chuckles. "Don't worry, I'm on my way." An hour later, Joe rolled up in his big red tow truck, grinning from ear to ear. Together, we hooked up the semi-truck, which groaned and creaked as it was lifted off the ground. As we hauled it away, I couldn't help but feel a wave of satisfaction wash over me. Problem solved. Right. Wrong. Less than 30 minutes after the truck disappeared down the road, I heard the unmistakable sound of police sirens behind me as I drove back toward the house. Pulling over, I rolled down my window to find Officer Daniels leaning into my car. He tipped his hat and gave me a curious look. "Got a report about a stolen vehicle," he said casually. "Mind explaining what's going on?" Stolen vehicle? Seriously? That's when it hit me. Karen must have called the cops the moment she realized her precious truck was gone. She probably spun some wild story about how I'd unlawfully taken it. Great. Just great. Officer Daniels listened patiently as I explained the whole mess, from Karen trespassing on my property to her ridiculous claims about HOA rules. Thankfully, I had proof. Photos of the truck parked on my land without permission and documents, showing that my farm wasn't part of any homeowners association. Still, being pulled over by the police because of a semi-truck dispute felt surreal. When we arrived at the station, things got even more absurd. Karen was already there, pacing back and forth like a character in a soap opera. Her sunglasses were perched on top of her head now, and her perfectly styled hair seemed a little less perfect, probably due to all the drama she'd caused. The moment she saw me, she pointed dramatically and started shouting. "That man stole my truck," she declared, glaring at everyone in the room. "He touted away without my permission." Officer Daniels raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "according to Mr. Thompson's records, this isn't part of your HOA's jurisdiction. In fact, it looks like you trespassed onto his property." For the first time since I'd met her, Karen looked flusterized. Her face turned bright red, and she fumbled for words. "Well, she stammered, clearly not used to being challenged. It was almost comical watching her struggle to keep her composure. Despite the mounting evidence against her, Karen refused to back down. Instead, she doubled down, insisting that I was somehow violating community standards and demanding that the police arrest me. Officer Daniels, bless him, looked like he was trying very hard not to laugh. "Ma'am," he said finally, "unless you can prove this property is part of your HOA, there's nothing I can do here." Karen stormed out of the station, muttering angrily under her breath. For a moment, I thought the nightmare was over. But deep down, I knew better. Someone like Karen doesn't give up easily. If anything, this was just the beginning of round 2. And something told me she wasn't done fighting yet. After Karen stormed out of the police station, I thought that would be the last I'd see of her. Surely, after being told she had no case and that my farm wasn't part of her HOA's jurisdiction, she'd realize she was in the wrong and move on. But if there's one thing I've learned about people like Karen, it's that they don't back down easily, not without making a scene or dragging others into their mess. The next morning, as I was feeding the horses, I noticed something strange. A shiny black SUV parked at the edge of my property. At first, I figured it might be a lost tourist, or maybe someone admiring the view of the fields. But then I saw Karen. She was standing near the fence, snapping pictures with her phone like some kind of amateur detective. "What are you doing now?" I called out, walking over to where she stood. She looked up, unfazed by my presence. "Documenting violations," she said matter-of-factly, holding up her phone like it was a weapon. "Your property clearly doesn't meet HOA standards. Look at this." She pointed dramatically at the barn, which had been standing tall for decades, weathered but sturdy. "This structure is an eyesore. And those chickens, they're roaming freely without any proper enclosures." I stared at her, dumbfounded. Chickens roaming freely. That's literally what chickens do. As for the barn, it wasn't exactly the Taj Mahal, but it worked just fine for storing hay and equipment. "Karen," I said slowly, trying to keep my voice steady, "this isn't part of your HOA. None of your rules apply here. But she wasn't listening. Her mind was made up. You may think you're above the law, she sniffed, adjusting her sunglasses. But trust me, I'll make sure justice is served. Justice? For a barn and some chickens. It was hard not to laugh, but I could tell she was serious. This wasn't just about the truck anymore. It had become personal. She wanted to prove she was right, even if it meant twisting reality to fit her narrative. Later that afternoon, while I was fixing a broken gate, Sarah came running out of the house, waving a piece of paper in her hand. "You're not going to believe this," she said breathlessly. "We got another letter from the HOA." I sighed, wiping sweat from my forehead before taking the envelope. Inside was yet another official-looking document, this time claiming I owed them money for damages caused by towing Karen's truck. Apparently, according to their lawyer, I'd caused her emotional distress. Emotional distress. From a woman who'd parked her semi-truck on my land without permission and then tried to accuse me of theft. Sarah gave me a worried look. "Maybe we should just pay them whatever they're asking," she suggested gently. "It's not worth the hassle." Pay them? After everything they'd done? No way. I shook my head firmly. If we give in now, they'll walk all over us. We didn't do anything wrong, Sarah. If Karen wants to play games, fine. But I'm not backing down. Determined to fight back, I reached out to a lawyer friend of mine named Mark. He agreed to take a look at the situation and offered some advice. The best defense is evidence, he told me over the phone. Keep records of everything. Emails, letters, photos, videos. Show how unreasonable they're being. So, I started documenting everything. Every time Karen showed up uninvited, I recorded her antics. When she sent threatening letters, I saved them. I even set up a trail camera near the driveway to catch her sneaking around late at night. Slowly but surely, I built a case that proved she was the one causing trouble, not me. Still, Karen didn't stop. She began spreading rumors around town, telling anyone who'd listen that I was a menace to the community. Some of my neighbors started avoiding me, unsure of what to believe. It was frustrating, but I reminded myself that the truth would eventually come out. One evening, as I sat on the porch watching the sunset, I realized something important. This wasn't just about me versus Karen anymore. It was about standing up for what's right, even when it's hard. People like Karen thrive on fear and intimidation, but if you refuse to play their game, they lose their power, and I wasn't about to let her win. Not on my farm. The legal back and forth with Karen and the HOA dragged on for weeks, each side digging in deeper like two stubborn bulls refusing to back down. Emails flew back and forth, letters piled up on my kitchen counter, and my lawyer friend Mark became a regular voice on my phone line. The whole thing was exhausting, but I wasn't about to let Karen bulldoze over me or my farm. Karen, however, seemed determined to escalate things. She didn't just stick to sending threatening letters or filing complaints. She took her grievances public. One day, while I was out plowing a field, Sarah called me in a panic. "You're not going to believe this," she said, her voice shaking. "There's a flyer nailed to the fence." I drove back home as fast as I could, heart pounding. Sure enough, stapled to the wooden post near the driveway, was a bright pink flyer. It read, *URGENT discussing dangerous behavior by local resident. Below that, in bold letters, it named me, and included a blurry photo of my barn and the semi-truck incident. "This is insane," I muttered, tearing the flyer down. "She's turning this into some kind of circus." Sarah crossed her arms, looking worried. "What are you going to do? People are going to show up expecting answers." "I'll give them answers," I said firmly, "but not the ones Karen wants." The meeting was scheduled for the following Friday night at the community center, a place I hadn't set foot in since moving here years ago. As much as I wanted to ignore the whole thing, I knew I couldn't. If Karen was going to drag my name through the mud, I had to face her head on. So I spent the next few days preparing. I gathered every piece of evidence I had. Photos of Karen trespassing, screenshots of her emails, even video footage of her parking the truck on my property without permission. I also reached out to a few neighbors who'd witnessed her antics firsthand. They agreed to speak up if needed. When the night of the meeting finally arrived, I walked into the packed auditorium, feeling a mix of nerves and determination. Dozens of people filled the rows, some curious, others clearly annoyed. A local news crew sat in the corner, cameras rolling. At the front of the room stood Karen, flanked by two other members of the HOA board. She looked smug, like she'd already won. After a brief introduction from the moderator, Karen stepped up to the podium. She launched into a dramatic speech, painting herself as the victim and me as some rogue farmer bent on destroying the harmony of Willow Creek Estates. "This man has shown blatant disregard for our community," she declared, pointing at me like I was some kind of villain. "He stole private property, ignored basic decency, and continues to flaunt his refusal to follow rules designed to keep us safe." The crowd murmured, some nodding along, others looking skeptical. When it was finally my turn to speak, I took a deep breath and approached the microphone. I started by thanking everyone for coming, then calmly explained my side of the story. I showed the surveillance footage of Karen repeatedly trespassing on my land. I displayed documents proving my farm wasn't part of the HOA. And finally, I played audio clips of her threats and demands, all recorded during our many confrontations. As the truth unfolded on the screen behind me, the room grew quieter and quieter. Even the reporters stopped typing mid-sentence. Karen's face turned pale, then red, as her lies unraveled in front of everyone. For the first time, she didn't have a snappy comeback or a rehearsed excuse. All she could do was stand there, frozen, as the crowd turned against her. By the end of the meeting, the tide had shifted completely. Several attendees spoke up, sharing their own frustrations with Karen's bullying tactics. One elderly woman stood up and said, "I've lived here for 20 years, and this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. That poor man hasn't done anything wrong." When the meeting adjourned, Karen practically ran out of the room, her entourage trailing behind her. It was clear she'd lost control of the narrative, and maybe even her grip on the HOA altogether. Driving home that night, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. This battle wasn't over yet, but for the first time in weeks, I felt like I was winning. The fallout from the town hall meeting spread like wildfire through Willow Creek. By the next morning, it seemed like everyone in the area had heard about Karen's public meltdown. Neighbors who had once avoided me now waved as I drove past, and some even stopped by the farm to offer support. One elderly couple brought over a pie with a note that read, "Thanks for standing up to her." It was a small gesture, but it meant the world. Karen, on the other hand, wasn't taking the loss well. She went completely silent for a few days. No more surprise visits to my property, no more threatening letters. For a moment, I thought she might have finally given up. But anyone who knows someone like Karen understands that silence doesn't mean surrender. It just means they're plotting their next move. Sure enough, late one evening, Sarah came rushing into the living room holding another envelope. "This arrived today," she said, handing it to me. Inside was yet another letter from the HOA's lawyer, this time alleging defamation and demanding an apology for damaging Karen's reputation at the town hall meeting. The tone was aggressive, almost desperate, as if they were trying to regain control of a situation that had spiraled far beyond them. I couldn't help but laugh, at least until I saw the dollar amount listed under potential damages. They weren't just asking for an apology. They wanted thousands of dollars in compensation. My stomach sank. This wasn't just about pride anymore. It was about money. And while I knew I hadn't done anything wrong, legal battles can drain your savings faster than you can say semi-truck. Sarah looked at me with concern. "What are we going to do?" she asked softly. "We fight," I replied firmly. "Mark already warned me they'd try something like this. We've got evidence proving everything they're saying is bogus." That night, I called Mark to update him on the latest development. He assured me we were still in a strong position legally, but he also reminded me that these kinds of disputes could drag on for months or longer if Karen refused to back down. Sometimes people like her only stop when they realize they've lost public support, he said. And judging by what happened at the town hall, it sounds like she's losing that battle. Determined not to let Karen intimidate me, I decided to take things a step further. With Mark's guidance, I filed a formal complaint against Karen and the HOA for harassment and trespassing. It was risky, I'll admit, but I figured it was time to turn the tables. If Karen wanted to play dirty, fine. I'd show her how it felt to be on the defensive. The response was swift. Within days, the HOA board sent out a mass email to its members, attempting to paint themselves as victims of a smear campaign led by yours truly. But instead of rallying support, their tactics backfired. Several residents replied to the thread, criticizing the board for wasting time and resources on petty squabbles instead of focusing on real issues like road maintenance and community safety. Even some longtime HOA loyalists began questioning whether Karen's antics were worth the headache. Meanwhile, Karen herself seemed to retreat entirely. Her shiny SUV no longer appeared near my property, and she stopped showing up at neighborhood events. Rumors swirled that she was facing internal pressure from the HOA board, who were reportedly embarrassed by the negative attention. Some even whispered she might resign her position altogether. Still, I knew better than to celebrate too soon. People like Karen don't disappear quietly. They implode, often taking others down with them. So I stayed vigilant, keeping detailed records of every interaction and ensuring my cameras were always running. If she tried anything else, I'd be ready. Despite the lingering tension, life on the farm slowly returned to normal, or as close to normal as it could get after such chaos. The chickens clucked happily, the cows grazed peacefully, and the fields stretched wide under the open sky. Every morning, as I sipped coffee on the porch, I reminded myself why I fought so hard. This land wasn't just dirt and crops, it was home. And no HOA queen or semi-truck drama was going to change that. As the weeks passed, Karen's attempts to retaliate grew quieter, but no less calculating. She may have retreated from public view, but behind the scenes, she was pulling strings like a puppet master trying desperately to regain control. Her latest tactic: rallying a small group of loyalists within the HOA to file nuisance complaints against my farm. Noise violations, unsightly equipment, even claims that the smell of manure was disrupting their quality of life. It was laughable until I realized how much paperwork and stress it created. Every time a new complaint landed on my doorstep, I felt the weight of frustration pressing down on me. Sarah noticed too. "You've already proven you're in the right," she said one evening as we sat at the kitchen table sorting through yet another stack of letters. "Why won't they just leave us alone?" I sighed, rubbing my temples. Because people like Karen don't know when to quit. They think if they throw enough mud, something will stick. But this wasn't just about Karen anymore. It had become a test of endurance. Each complaint meant more phone calls with Mark, more trips to town for hearings, and more sleepless nights spent wondering how long this would drag on. Still, I refused to give in. Every challenge gave me another chance to prove my point. This was my land, and I wasn't going to let anyone bully me into submission. One afternoon, while repairing a fence near the edge of my property, I spotted Karen's SUV parked along the road again. This time, she wasn't alone. A man in a suit stood beside her, clipboard in hand, jotting notes as they surveyed my farm from afar. My blood boiled. Was she hiring some kind of inspector now? Grabbing my phone, I snapped a few photos before marching over to confront them. "Can I help you?" I called out, keeping my tone firm but calm. The man glanced up, startled, while Karen quickly stepped in front of him. "We're conducting an official inspection," she announced, her voice dripping with false authority. "Your property is causing disturbances to neighboring residents." "Excuse me." I shot back, crossing my arms. "This isn't your jurisdiction. You've been told that multiple times. The man, clearly uncomfortable, cleared his throat. I'm just doing my job. Sir, if you'd like, we can discuss any concerns later. No need, I said sharply. Whatever report you're planning to write will be added to the pile of nonsense I've already dealt with. Feel free to take all the pictures you want. I'll make sure they're included in my counter-complaint. Karen's face flushed red, but she didn't argue. Instead, she turned on her heel and climbed back into her SUV, muttering under her breath. The man hesitated for a moment, then followed her without another word. As they drove off, I couldn't help but smile. For someone who prided herself on being untouchable, Karen looked rattled, and that gave me hope. Later that week, news spread through the neighborhood that the HOA board was holding an emergency meeting to address growing unrest among its members. Apparently, many were fed up with Karen's antics and the endless drama surrounding my farm. Some even accused the board of prioritizing personal vendettas over actual community issues. When I heard about this, I knew it was time to strike. With Mark's encouragement, I drafted a letter addressed not just to the HOA board, but to all its members. In it, I outlined everything that had happened, from Karen's trespassing to the baseless complaints, and attached copies of evidence proving my innocence. I ended the letter by urging residents to demand transparency and accountability from their leadership. Then I sent it, not just via email, but also printed copies delivered directly to every mailbox in Willow Creek Estates. The response was overwhelming. Dozens of neighbors reached out to thank me for standing up to Karen and exposing the truth. Many admitted they'd suspected foul play, but hadn't known what to do about it. Others promised to attend the upcoming meeting to voice their dissatisfaction. By the time the day arrived, the community center was packed with angry homeowners ready to hold the board accountable. When Karen walked in, flanked by two nervous-looking board members, the room erupted into murmurs. Gone was her usual confidence. Instead, she looked pale and uneasy. As residents took turns speaking, each one criticized her behavior and demanded answers. By the end of the meeting, it was clear Karen's reign of terror was over. She resigned quietly a few days later, leaving behind a trail of embarrassment and broken trust. It wasn't the dramatic exit I'd imagined, but it was satisfying nonetheless. Finally, after months of chaos, peace began to return to Willow Creek and to my farm. With Karen gone and the HOA board scrambling to rebuild trust, life on the farm finally started to feel normal again. The constant tension that had hung over us like a storm cloud began to lift, replaced by the familiar rhythm of country living. Chickens pecked at the dirt, cows grazed lazily in the fields, and the sun rose each morning without the shadow of drama looming over it. But even as things settled down, I couldn't help but reflect on everything that had happened, and what it taught me about standing up for myself. The aftermath of Karen's resignation was almost comical. Rumors spread that she'd moved to another development farther out of town, where she promptly tried to take over their HOA. Apparently, her arrival caused immediate chaos, with residents quickly realizing they'd inherited a ticking time bomb. Some folks joked that I should send them a welcome basket filled with legal documents and advice on how to handle her. I laughed along with them, but deep down, I felt a pang of sympathy. Karen wasn't just a bully. She was someone who thrived on control because she didn't know how to exist without it. In a strange way, I pitied her. Back home, the neighborhood dynamic shifted noticeably. Many of my neighbors who had once avoided me now stopped by regularly, not just to chat, but to thank me for exposing the truth. One couple even brought over fresh-baked bread as a token of gratitude. "You stood your ground when no one else would," the wife said warmly. We needed that. Even some former HOA loyalists came around, admitting they'd been too afraid to speak up before. They'd promised to push for reforms within the organization, vowing to make it less about rules and more about community. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress, and that gave me hope. As for my farm, it became something of a local legend. People passing through Willow Creek often slowed down to admire the weathered barn or snap photos of the chickens roaming freely. A few kids from nearby farms started showing up on weekends, asking if they could help feed the animals or learn how to fix fences. Sarah and I welcomed them with open arms, happy to share our little slice of paradise with others. For the first time in months, the driveway wasn't blocked by unwanted visitors. It was filled with laughter and curiosity. Still, I didn't let my guard down completely. After everything that had happened, I knew better than to assume peace would last forever. I kept meticulous records of all interactions, maintained my trail cameras, and stayed active in conversations about improving local policies. If anyone ever tried to pull another Karen-style stunt, I'd be ready. One crisp autumn afternoon, as golden leaves swirled in the breeze, I stood on the porch sipping coffee and watching the horizon. The field stretched endlessly, bathed in soft sunlight. Sarah joined me, leaning against the railing with a content smile. "You did good," she said quietly. "Not just for us, but for everyone here." I nodded, feeling a swell of pride mixed with relief. This fight hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. My farm wasn't just land. It was a symbol of resilience, a reminder that sometimes you have to stand your ground even when the odds seem stacked against you. And if anyone ever tries to tell me where I can or can't park a semi-truck, well, let's just say I've got a tow truck number saved in my phone, and I'm not afraid to use it.